Wired released an article over the weekend that dropped a bombshell on OpenAI, which could open them up potentially to hundreds of millions of dollars worth of legal liability. The alleged action is such a dumb, unforced error that it's hard to believe it's true. But given that Wired is undoubtedly aware they could be sued for libel, and this is a very damning accusation, they must have evidence to support this reporting. So, what are they doing? Why is it so bad? We're going to break it all down. First, it's really important to understand at a fundamental level what all this AI is. It's all probability mapping across a set of possible outcomes. So, for example, an English sentence, you feed in many examples of English sentences, you understand the probability distribution, and when somebody asks you to write a poem, you know roughly the shape of that. The issue is when you want to get into more fine-grained work, so like legal work, or potentially putting together, they mention tourism slides and brochures and things like that. You're starting to get into very specialized forms of writing, forms of work, and you need to collect that. Okay, no problem. So they're hiring specialists. These are people who have spent their entire careers working in these areas, and they know how to produce this work. Very good. The issue is they're asking them to bring work from their past jobs, actual work performed for other clients. If it's not immediately apparent to you, and apparently it wasn't to OpenAI legal or HR, or they weren't in the loop, either way, absolutely insane, the reason why this is so bad is because the work that was performed was paid for by other clients. Those other clients, they own the copyright or the trademark or what have you to that intellectual property. That's what you're paid for as a person working for these companies. Let's take a quick example. Let's say that you're an artist or a writer and you create, as part of working at Marvel Comics, a new character. You might think, well, this is my creation. I came up with the character. I developed the backstory. I drew all the art, all that. But what you're actually performing is a work for hire. You don't own any of the rights to that by nature of your contract and the relationship that you have with Marvel Comics. If you were to try to reuse that in other situations, they would sue you. Very clearly, very obviously, this should be obvious to everyone. Why this is not obvious to OpenAI remains to be seen. If I had to guess, it would be because before ChatGPT was released and the broader public understood about LLMs and companies understood the value of all these different posts and text messages and news articles and books, they were able to vacuum up a large portion of the internet essentially for free. And they are facing potential legal actions based off of that. But they've been tremendously successful based off of essentially rummaging through everybody's garbage up to this point. And so what they're doing now is, after people have posted signs on their garbage and everywhere else saying, don't rummage through this, we expect to be paid. You know, you have the example of Reddit recently striking a deal with Google for training on their data. Now they've decided to just walk in to someone's living room, turn on the TV, pull out a beer from the fridge, and just make themselves at home. So let's break into the article and let's understand exactly what's going on. OpenAI is asking contractors to upload work from past jobs to evaluate the performance of AI agents. To prepare agents for office work, the company is asking contractors to upload projects from past jobs, leaving it to them to strip out confidential and personally identifiable information. All right, so largely what we talked about, although there is another wrinkle that we'll touch on in a minute with the PII and confidentiality. As we discussed, the company is launching a new evaluation process to measure the performance of its AI models against human professionals across a variety of agencies. OpenAI says this is a key indicator of its progress towards AGI, artificial general intelligence. So one thing to note is they may not be training on this data, which is a marginal improvement over their previous ridiculous illegality, but only a marginal one. We've hired folks across occupations to help collect real-world tasks modeled off those you've done in your full-time jobs, so we can measure how well AI models perform on these tasks, reads one confidential document from OpenAI. Take existing pieces of long-term or complex work, hours or days plus, that you've done in your occupation and turn each into a task. One thing that is absolutely gross is you'll notice they are contractors and they are being asked to give pieces of work from their real full-time jobs. So this is part-time work, which they're being asked for some amount of money, not full-time employment, to essentially automate themselves out of having a job longer term. So very gross. OpenAI is asking contractors to describe tasks they've done in their current job or in the past and upload real-world examples of the work they did, according to an OpenAI presentation about the project viewed by Wired. Each of the examples should be a concrete output, not a summary, but the actual file, example, Word doc, PDF, PowerPoint, Excel, image, repo, code bases potentially, which, yeah, all right, good luck scrubbing out everything that's proprietary out of that. OpenAI says people can also share fabricated work examples created to demonstrate how they would realistically respond in specific scenarios. All right, so what we have here is we have a kind of classic X, so input into the function being the worker, and then Y, output. So collection of good known examples so that then they can train or evaluate their model and say, hey, if I'm asked to provide, for example, a legal briefing for eminent domain, we've had 25 examples. We have a very good idea of what that looks like. Okay, now we can generate and we can hopefully get closer. OpenAI instructs contractors to delete corporate intellectual property and personally identifiable information from the work files they upload. Under a section labeled Important Reminders, OpenAI tells the workers to remove or anonymize any personal information, proprietary or confidential data, material non-public information, for example, internal strategy, unreleased product details. This whole thing feels like entrapment. Like honestly, if I were in a job interview and all of a sudden they were like, Mike, hey, we really like you, we'd like to hire you, but we need you to steal a stapler from your prior place of employment. I'd be like, no, like what are we doing? Is this a joke? No, I don't have any documents that I can give you. I cannot do this. I would be stating it very emphatically because I would expect I'm being videotaped as some dragnet operation to catch corporate espionage or something like this. Like this just feels like someone is interviewing you to do something illegal and they're like, you'll help us rob this bank, right? Contractors everywhere. You should not be storing PII or confidential information longer than you have to. Certainly, because that just opens you up to being sued. And Evan Brown below, he talks about this a little bit. He tells Wired that AI labs that receive confidential information from contractors at the scale could be subject to trade secret misappropriation claims. Contractors who offer documents from their previous workplaces to an AI company, even scrubbed, could be at risk of violating their previous employer's non-disclosure agreements or exposing trade secrets. Yeah, you having these documents, delete them. Delete them right now. If you have things like this and they're just floating around on your laptop and you don't have a need to still have these and you're not handling sensitive data appropriately, you're just opening yourself up to liability. The most bizarre part of this, like I can understand, in business, there is a certain amount of illegality that happens, right? I love the financial commentator Matt Levine. He writes for Bloomberg News. He's really, really good. He's a former lawyer. He breaks down complex financial deals, stock deals, different corporate finance things. Okay, one of the things he says that I think is so money is at these big banks, at these big financial institutions, a crime is always happening somewhere, just by nature of having 20,000 people who are all, go-getters. They're all trying to make their numbers. Crime is constantly happening. But what distinguishes a business that commits a crime from a criminal business is whether you have in place different efforts to maintain order and to track and try to prevent it. So a criminal business is one that just puts all that aside and kind of they standardize on doing things that are illegal. A business that has committed a crime is something entirely different. And this feels like it's starting to go in that direction. When I was looking, I had never heard of Handshake AI. So Handshake AI apparently is, let's see. AI labs have long relied on third-party contracting firms such as Surge, Mercor, and Scale AI to hire and manage data contractors. In recent years, however, AI labs have required higher quality data in order to improve their model, forcing them to pay more for skilled talent capable of producing it. This has created a lucrative sub-industry within the AI training world. Handshake said it was valued at $3.5 billion in 2022. Okay, so I've heard of Scale AI. I hadn't heard of the other ones. I had always thought that these third-party labs, they were essentially a way of having plausible deniability, so that yes, you're getting data, yes, you think it's extremely likely that the data is in some way not something you should have, but you want it, and so you pay someone like Handshake AI or someone else to deliver you data. And in your legal agreement, you say this has been properly licensed, acquired in good ways, and then it's on that party, and you have kind of that little fig leaf to lean on in court. So the fact that they're doing this directly now, again, absolute insanity. Anyway, that's all I have for today on this. Thanks for joining me.